thank you for the chat. And like, how are you finding Montreux Jazz Festival so far?
I love it. I was here 3 years ago on a smaller stage and had a lovely time then. I was in the Lake this morning. I'm a massive fan of Frankenstein, and obviously Lake Geneva is where Mary Shelley wrote it.
I didn't actually know that.
Did you
so
not?
That's a cool bit of trivia.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
No, basically she was
I was
like
obsessed with Frankenstein as well.
She was like bound to a house like on holiday with Lord Byron and Percy Shelley, and they set a challenge of like, let's all try and write a ghost story. And so it was like, you know, they'd been out rowing on Lake Geneva and stuff, and she wrote it on Lake Geneva.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was 18. She was a teenager.
It's kind of upsetting in a way. She's too talented, but no, I was obsessed with those stories when I was a kid, like just like the gothic kind of horror stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so you've just announced your second album, The Fatal Flaw.
Yeah.
So should we just start with like where that title comes from, because it's Secret History?
Yeah, The Fatal Flaw comes from The Secret History, and which is sort of it's becoming a slight thing, because Cacophony, the title of that, was inspired by a book by Stephen Fry, his book Mythos, and it was just sort of vaguely inspired by the first chapter of that book. And then The Fatal Flaw, I was thinking about it, and I am so obsessed with that line from that book of, does such a thing as the fatal flaw exist, that showy dark crack running through a life. And I think a lot of the songs like are this like psychoanalysis, or this post-mortem, or this digging down deep into the roots of something, trying to figure out like why I love the way that I love, why I make the art that I make, why I am the way that I am, and why other people are the way that they are. And The Fatal Flaw feels like something that we search for and can never actually find, because it's a really seductive idea that the way someone is could be boiled down to one thing, right? And it's a title that's meant to inspire like questions, and it's like, is the fatal flaw like in the way that I love? Is it my need to create art that will sort of like come like shape my life in that way? Is it patriarchy? Because often I describe patriarchy as like just like a crack running through a life because it tears everything, and we have to like move around it. Or is it like lovelessness? Or is it love? Because love is often called a weakness, but I don't agree. But yeah, the title is really, really inspired, like meant to inspire questions in that way.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess also like to me it just kind of triggered the thing of like, you know, being fallible as well.
Yeah, I think like weakness and strength is definitely like a big like theme on the album in that sense. Yeah.
And so I feel like you're a fellow Greek myth obsessive, because I mean you had Narcissus from LA, and then you've got Pyrrhus.
Yeah, Pyrrhus.
Sorry, like pronunciation.
I think that's how you pronounce it. I mean, I've only ever read it, but like people don't say that name.
No, exactly. So, but can you tell me a bit about like where that one particularly came from?
I was thinking about this the other day. I have like a fascination, and I think we all do because of where we are at, like in culture, with like the indoctrination of young boys into patriarchy. And Pyrrhus is inspired by like a book by Pat Barker, and it is based on the Iliad, and Pyrrhus is Achilles' son, and he is painted, she writes him so beautifully, he is painted like this very angry, very violent teenage boy, but he was also a teenage boy, and he's got spots, and he's fallible, and he's like just like teenager like, and he's a child trying to live up to the legacy of his like demigod father. And he just reads like a modern day teenage boy, like indoctrinated by the manosphere,
like the first incel.
Yeah. And because he's a child who is so like bloodthirsty and misguided
because of what he's been taught by men.
Totally.
You know, because what they've told him about his father, and they've only told one side.
Yeah.
You know, him as this great warrior, and then, you know, I think he sees, you know, that physical weakness or whatever, but it's, you know, his love for whatever, and just
absolutely. And it's like the indoctrination into like the institution of war, right? And I was thinking a lot about Army Dreamers by Kate Bush, like, and there are a couple little sonic Easter eggs to indicate how that was inspired by that, because it's a song about a boy from the perspective of his mother watching him fall victim and be seduced by war, by patriarchy, by the promise of like so-called honor to like die in battle and to kill other people. And it's one of my favorite songs on the album because toxic masculinity, the masculinity that we're witnessing today is a tragedy. It's a massive tragedy. And I wanted to write a song that reflected that, and it felt like a tapestry depicting a battle or a tragedy or something like that was like an epic tale that ends badly, because it does. When
no one wins.
No one wins, and young boys are thrown to the wolves, and they like, you know, enlist as soldiers and they die for no reason. You know, like. And
I think it's kind of, I feel like society at the moment is kind of like we're kind of circling around. It's kind of what you're talking about with the Fatal Flaw, that whole idea of, you know, kind of circling it but not really finding the root of it and not being able to find like an answer as well.
Totally. And it requires like constant like unfolding, you know, all the time.
Well, nuanced discussion as well, which also we seem quite incapable of at the moment. So
yeah, well, another reason why, like, another aspect of Pyrrhus is like Pyrrhus is famous for killing two people, one of which is a baby, is Hector's son, in order to end Hector's bloodline, and the other is the old King Priam, who's like a very old, like decrepit man. And it got me thinking about like the immense violence that makes its way to us like through art screens, and how it is so often like very young men who are inflicting that in like countries that aren't theirs, like inflicting just immensely senseless and cruel violence on like communities of people. And I was thinking a lot about the type of boy who is groomed into doing that, and put into these, you know.
Yeah, it feels like there's, I mean, I think what you capture really well in that song, especially because you're singing from that particular perspective, but like the disillusionment, I think that's kind of like plaguing our society, particularly at the moment, UK and the US especially. And I think it's also just really interesting because obviously like Labour, you know, that was such a sort of impactful moment, and like it's like a movement in itself. You know, and it's been obviously like a bit of a whirlwind, I imagine, for you the last few years. But, you know, that was really incredible to see, I think. Like, it was just, you know, how affected people were by that song. And I don't know, it felt like sort of you just said something that everyone had been feeling for so long. Because of what it was so pertinent as well, like with all the events that were going on.
What happened, you know? Labour ended up being a lightning rod for like the cultural temperature at the time, and like it indicates that change needs to happen, right? Because like the volume of people that resonate, that song resonates with, the movement that happens around it and continues to evolve, like is proof that change needs to be made. You know, and it's really, unfortunately, Labour only becomes more and more relevant as we see, like, you know, what wasn't happening at the time when I wrote that is this glorification of like trad wifedom, right? Like, and these like young far right women who are funnily enough, they're content creators and they have their job and they spend all their time trying to convince women to not work and not be in the working sphere, and that they should stay at home and have children and not have a job and have no financial security and have no pension. And Labour is massively about that. And it builds and builds because like we're at a point in time where it's like more relevant in many nuanced ways than it was at the time I wrote it.
Yeah, I think it feels like listening to the second album, which is fantastic. I don't know if I actually said that yet, but it's really enjoying it. It's gorgeous. And just again, kind of like coming from also, I think, just like Greek myth obsession, and I just feel like the reason those myths are kind of still feel so pertinent today is because they were written about human flaws, and they were, you know, there were stories about gods, but they were created to, you know, kind of as warnings for like the fallible nature of humans.
Totally.
Right?
I think also, like, I don't know, I think women in particular feel drawn to like stories from mythology because
I want to talk about why you think this is, because it's definitely a thing.
I feel like I go for that. My explanation for that is that so often like emotion and like real life experiences that women go through are invalidated like before you can even finish your sentence, and then we have these great epic tales and these stories and these tomes of like, you know, gods and humans and how they act and their feelings, and citing them gives weight to these feelings. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not just talking about my emotions, I'm citing this person and I'm putting all these layers of history behind this human feeling, which stretches across time. Like, you know, I think I like myths in that way, because it is just old human tales. And I think one of the reasons that I think part of it is patriarchy, because women there is so much culture that has been lost, like, and we have like a collective grief around that, and there are female characters that we recognize the same struggle as, like, in myths, whether it's Circe or Medusa, or, you know, like, these archetypes of women's strength and sometimes solidarity and sometimes suffering, you know.
Always being depicted as monstrous, though, right? A lot of the time. I mean, one thing I kind of was like interested in, I guess, was like the idea of, you know, whoever was writing these myths, men, a lot of the time, but kind of characterizing the elements and like the kind of monstrous things of it, like sirens, harpies, you know, these like monstrous creatures that are elements of nature. And I kind of always wondered, is there like a tie-in with, you know, why they would call ships like she, and like you're kind of trying to tame the untamable, and that fear of like women's emotions, of like, you know, and of that life-giving aspect that's always kind of been such a source of resentment and jealousy and fear and misunderstanding. And you know, I feel like we could talk about this all day, but also artwork as well is like been a big source of inspiration. So there's a song inspired by Christina Rossetti, who I love, again, like the pre-Raphaelites, I'm just obsessed with. And,
it's inspired by like the pre-Raphaelites as a whole, and obviously like Christina Rossetti is totally like intertwined with that. Like it's more inspired by Jane Morris, who's the muse of the pre-Raphaelites, and her and like Elizabeth Siddal, and I wrote Pre-Raphaelite as a song about basically all the women, all the girls that I've ever just been really obsessed with and admired so much in the way that they carry themselves, their appearance, their mannerisms, the way that the hair is tucked into like their shirt in like a specific way. And, you know, since writing it, I've realized I really intended it as like a love letter to the female gaze. And we're at a point in time right now where there is so much like belittling of women's appearances. Like social media has got like awful in terms of like the standards that boys and men have for women, and it is such an insular beauty. It's such a tiny sliver of a beauty standard where it's like very infantile, based in like whiteness, right? And based in sexual attraction. And I wrote Pre-Raphaelite about like the way that you admire a woman without it being about sexual attraction. It's like and looking at something like a painting, and it's full of depth, and it's alive, and it's beautiful. And I think at a time where like some of the comments I get on my appearance and my body, when I know that I have it far better than some other people, is like it's manosphere language, it's incel language, it's code, it's all hilarious and weird and exhausting.
Did you see, like, I'm assuming you saw CMAT's kind of like open letter thing? I was really moved by that, and I think even having written about all of this for like the better part of 15 years or something, and it just never ends, but I think just reading how much it affected her, and her being open about that, because I think the thing that really struck me was she was saying she kind of had to tell people, I'm not being brave. Yes. This isn't like me being courageous.
She's not a spokesperson for someone with a certain type of body. This is like, when we require women to do that, it plays into the hands of people who would like women to be waylaid and held back by beauty standards, because then instead of making her music like she wants to do, she's having to like stop and explain her appearance, like, which just, and she just has a normal body, like, and like, as do I, as do so many people, like, but yeah, it's getting really insidious. But anyway, Pre-Raphaelite is more like, I don't know, I wrote it very much, I wanted it to be fun and girly and just filled with like the richness that I've every tiny little thing that I've noticed like girls do throughout my life, and the times that I've been immensely like jealous of them and coveted what they have and felt like their magic and they're some muse that I want to make myself in the image of. And I realized that it was all incredibly like female gaze coded, because then I was, you know, getting comments that are like, do you know that men and boys care about hip dips now? That's a thing. Like, and
as in, like, I mean, I've seen, and just like I sort of, first I became aware of even that being a thing. So I feel like every year we discover like we're told about a new aspect of your body that is a flaw. Yeah. And like, I didn't even know the term hip dips until I think a year ago because of gym talk and whatever. Yeah. And so this is the latest thing, like, of literally being female. Yeah. Like, being a woman is now apparently an issue.
Yeah, my body hair makes people really angry. Right. Like, and all of these things are things that like are also exist in some of the most beautiful paintings by the old masters. Like, ever, do you know what I mean? And I think like that's sort of what I was trying to get across in Pre-Raphaelite. Yeah. Okay, it's kind of fascinating, obviously, and tragic at the same time. But the way that actually, like, we think we're so advanced as a culture, but the way we've regressed. If you look at paintings over history, like Titian, Raphael, Botticelli, you know, like the way they were depicting women, all shapes and sizes is like voluptuous, slender, whatever, like every kind of facet. I think that's why I'm so drawn to the Pre-Raphaelites, though. I think they're so misunderstood. I think they're personally like very misunderstood. Really? Like, well, I think there's a certain person. I kind of really objected to an essay I read a while ago, and it was from a feminist perspective, but really like hating on the Pre-Raphaelites, saying that, you know, they're like passive, and you know, they're all kind of like victims or whatever. Yeah. And I just thought, personally, just having grown up like being obsessed with all of them, you know, like Siddal and everyone, just, I think, you know, like, it was actually really rare, like the way they depict, like, with these incredibly strong personalities
jaws, and the flaming hair, and like, you know, and they're just I think they're active in their own stories, and like the focus is entirely on them, how they're feeling. There are often no men in those works, you know, and they're like the agents in their own stories.
They're not there to seduce. They're immensely beautiful, and it feels like, I don't know, like, people have different opinions about art. I suppose that's the joy. But I love, like, some of them are like cheeky, some of them are like coy, some of them are just, you know, furious or just interesting. And I think I feel like there's a lot of admiration of women in Pre-Raphaelite paintings without an awful lot of sexualization. I think that's
I think that's really spot on. That's actually, it's the lack of sexualization, I think, and all of that. I actually can't think of any kind of Pre-Raphaelite work that I would say is sexualizing ever. I mean, you could argue like they're very much from the female gaze themselves, like those works.
It makes me think of things like there's a phrase that literally makes me see red and like go into a blind rage, and that's the phrase "love handles," because I hate the implication that in order to justify having like any kind of like fat on your body, it has to be like a sexual thing, right? Yeah. Like
for the gratification of men.
Like it's and I think sometimes the impulse to like be slimmer is in order to like not be sexualized so much. Do you know what I mean? Because sexualization is the first tool that some people and like male gaze-minded people reach for in order to reassure girls that it's okay. You're like, you know, men actually prefer girls that are slimmer. It's like, I don't want that.
Roxane Gay, like, you read her memoir.
I haven't
also,
read that.
Getting quite personal, but like kind of similar experiences, I think, of having something traumatizing happen to you and then like almost consciously changing, or like subconsciously, I guess, but changing your body just literally, I think, to try and get men to leave you alone, and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
No. Yeah. But and so other songs on the album, is there like one you particularly want to get into?
I can't think of it.
We should talk about Good Girl, because that was a single. The video for that was absolutely stunning. So beautifully done.
Yeah, Dear Richard.
Yeah.
He's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. So, I mean, this maybe is more in the kind of like the angry kind of almost vengeful in a way. Like
I wrote. I mean, so much of the album is like really inspired by art and painting and like the, I don't know, like the feeling that is in art and like the meta discussion of like making art. And so it's funny, Good Girl actually came about based on some self-portraits that I did. And I haven't shared them anywhere. But I was basically trying to paint myself or draw myself like sort of like a wild animal, and like I was setting myself a challenge. I was like, can I draw myself in a way that evades the male gaze? And let's see what that feels like. And it was just this sort of like image. I was really happy with it, and I had like 2 of them, and I drew these like trees surrounding it, like it's sort of this almost like Edenic, like utopian garden. And I was like, God, wouldn't it be so nice to just like walk on this planet without worrying what I think about, and without worrying about what I look like. And I was thinking about you know, how originally we were only really supposed to see our reflections in moving water. Like there aren't really any other reflective surfaces in nature. And we're kind of cursed by like knowing so intimately what we look like, whereas it wasn't really built to be our concern.
Right.
And I was thinking about how freeing that would have been. And the song is just really this like internal monologue about all my feelings to do with it, where it's like, you know, you're good enough, but also you don't need to be beautiful in order to live on this earth. That's not the rent you pay. Like, it doesn't matter. And I think, you know, obviously we had body positivity. I don't know. I remember that being a big thing when I was like in my late teens, and that was a very good thing. But I think there was a lot of emphasis on like, you are beautiful. Find this beautiful about yourself. You are beautiful. And it's like, it's actually okay if your aim isn't to be beautiful all the time. Like there are some times where I'm not beautiful, and that's fine. I don't want to be looked at. I want to just sort of like be a thing in nature.
And we place so much stock in how we're perceived by others and how we like appear to other people. And like feeling like this pressure to conform to certain beauty standards. And then I guess one other like I think running theme on the records is sort of like terms of love, you know, under patriarchy, and you're talking about the Fatal Flaw, and
it's an album like entirely about love. And I was reading All About Love by Bell Hooks, and I loved the anthology like structure of that book, where she talks about familial love, she talks about romantic love, she talks about self-love, she talks about like love between friends, and you know, getting over trauma with love, and loving dysfunctionally. And I wanted the album to read like an anthology in that way, where like the songs all engage with love in its different elements. So, you know, Good Girl is a song that's so overtly about self-love, and then a great deal of the album engages with what it is to be a woman and loving a man, and patriarchy being present in that. And so I naturally have a fascination with masculinity, because it is so like it is something that has had to be so talked about in like relationships that I have with men.
Yeah, and that's kind of extended recently to like even celebrity relationships. Like we seem so, I think there's this real unpacking of certain dynamics, and I think we seem really struck again by couples where there seems to actually be like a balance, or like, you know, it's kind of, again, it's kind of sad in a way, like how I guess like impressed or enamored we are when, I'm just going to throw in like the Tom Holland and Zendaya relationship, because I do love both of them like in a non-obsessive way, but just that has been such a conversation recently about how the relationship works, and isn't that kind of devastating?
Like, I mean, I feel like it's I mean, love them. It's delightful. It's also unremarkable to me, because like there's no world, and it's so much easier said than done, and I know that. Like there's no world in which I would settle for a relationship that isn't founded on respect and equality. I just think that's where we're at now, and I think that's a big thing that is causing cultural tension, because men are realizing that they can't get away with as much anymore, and they can't get away with women now in our modern world being like domestic, being the head of the domestic sphere, and being like housewives, but also working, and also the, you know, women are like financially independent now for the most part, so men actually have to talk about their emotions, and they can't just like you know, because
they haven't been taught to, they've been conditioned that's not.
I know, but then exactly. So then I think I wrote Labour, and that was such a massive moment in terms of like my feminism, and like the number of like responses I had to that about what it did for women in like abusive or exploitative or, you know, any sort of like awful relationship.
Did you get a lot of fans reaching out to you?
So many
stories, yeah.
So many, like as in where they, and the credit goes entirely to them, that it was what catalyzed them leaving an abusive situation or leaving in like a situation where they were just being exploited or taken for granted. And some of them are like incredibly serious or like situations of domestic violence, and it's so moving. But I wrote that, and then I think this album, I was reading so much bell hooks, like I said, and she writes with, she is so uncompromisingly like, she's so uncompromising in the way that she writes about patriarchy, but she is so loving in the way that she writes about men. And after I wrote Labour, I was like, I have this captive audience. What do I write about now? And then I write things like Good Boy and Pyrrhus, where it's like, we actually need to be talking about masculinity, and men need to understand and separate that from their core being.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're only ever going to see it as like a personal attack.
Right.
Which is exhausting when you are a woman trying to contend with that. But there's not that language out there in the mainstream.
Right. Well, I kind of touched on this earlier, I think, about like the sort of the black and whiteness of the current like way we have discourse, where we don't essentially have discourse. We just have like, there's one side and there's another side, and it's kind of shouting. And I've just always had this, and you know, having, you know, received any amount of like kind of hate from album reviews that fans didn't like or whatever, like it's always misogyny and you know, rape and death threats and all that kind of fun stuff. But I just kind of constantly stand by the idea that you will never sway someone over to your way of thinking by screaming, you know, like epithets at them. It doesn't work.
I spend so much time like in comment sections with men being like, you have more in common with me than the men you're defending. Like, you have no fight with me, buddy. Like, and so I get so many comments on videos of Labour where men are incensed. They're so angry. And they say men have awful mental health. Men like have a massive suicide rate. Men get drafted into wars. And I was like, you have just listed 3 things that are a result of the patriarchy.
Right. Yeah.
Like that. Point out to me where that was women's doing. We're trying to take down the same thing, and when I'm trying to take it down, you just scream your problems at me and then don't do anything.
Have you seen the video where the guy's trying to explain to a woman like why she needs men around? It's like, who's going to protect you? And then she goes, from who?
Yeah.
It just sums up. But so I mean, so album's out in September, and you're touring at the moment, and then and so I don't know, just like, I guess if you're gonna describe your album to someone that didn't know you or whatever, like, how would you introduce it?
This album is an album of songs for great halls. It is songs that feel like heavy, massive paintings and great tapestries depicting battles and ancient stories that are also really human.
Sounds pretty amazing. Thank you so much.